are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you for making Locked On Eagles and Locked On Commanders your first listen each and every day. Welcome in Eagles and Commanders fans to Locked On Podcast Network Crossover Thursday. I'm Louis DiBiase, host of the Locked On Eagles podcast. He's Chris Russell, host of Locked On Commanders. Today's episode of Crossover Thursday is presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick 2 to 5 players, and if they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. That's prizepicks.com, promo code LOCKEDON. Chris, it's good to talk to you, man. First time in a long time. This is an NFC East rivalry that's always an important game. The 1-1 Commanders against the 2-0 Eagles in D.C., but it feels even more intense this year, obviously, with the quarterback story.
Yeah, Louis, good to be with you as well. I guess we did a little preseason hit, which seems like forever ago now, but it's been a while since you and I have gotten to do one of these crossovers. So always good to be with you, and hope you're doing well. Yeah, I mean, this is interesting, because of the obvious storyline. A, it's a division game, of course. B, it's, one program that seemingly is always in quicksand or some sort of molassesy type substance, versus the Eagles, who had a quick rebuild for the most part, and are seemingly, in all accounts, heading in the right direction. But then you have the Carson Wentz storyline, right? It wasn't that long ago, of course, that Carson Wentz was actually quarterbacking for the Philadelphia Eagles at FedEx Field against the then Washington football team in Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio's first game. And I'll never forget it because I was there. It was the first game of the COVID era. He went right down the field, bing, bang, boom, 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 and then got sacked like 8,000 times in that game because the Eagles didn't have an offensive line. But Carson going against the Eagles for the first time since they dumped him. And of course, a lot of things have changed for the Eagles. A lot of things have changed for Carson. Hell, of course, he's been already through another team already. So it just adds to the juiciness, if you will, of the script. And that's cool, right? We all need a little something more than the all-22 tape.
And Chris, Carson Wentz, Jalen Hurts, they've kind of downplayed what this game means to everybody involved on Sunday, but I think it really is an intense matchup for that reason, not just because of the division rivalry, but because of the Carson Wentz storyline. I mean, it is crazy that, even it sounds like a long time, but 5 years ago really isn't that long ago. I was at the game Monday Night Football where Carson Wentz had 4 touchdowns and really had his MVP performance against this Washington team on Monday Night Football. To see how far we've come there, and now he's on the other side of this rivalry, like he said in his press conference on Wednesday, it really just kind of feels surreal. And for the Eagles, there was just so much that happened that the relationship had to end. But for the Washington side, I still kind of understand why they kicked the tires and made that trade. There's a lot not to like about Wentz's game, Chris, right? And you've seen that the first 2 weeks, but you've also seen some flashes of that ceiling that Philadelphia was also used to, right? I mean, he's producing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And why Washington went after Wentz as aggressively as they did is, A, they were afraid to be left at the altar, by free agents, Jameis Winston and Mitchell Trubisky, that type. We all know that this was about as weak as you're ever going to get in terms of a first round or top end draft class, right? If it was this upcoming year, it would have probably been a very different situation, Louis. I think we would all agree on that. And, of course, just because things didn't work out in Indianapolis, for whatever reasons, and I think we know some of the reasons, maybe not all of the reasons. Yeah. I think Irsay gets blamed for a lot of it. I'm sure, listen, he had a lot to do with it, but he wasn't the only one. I can guarantee you that. I've talked to people inside that building. He was not the only one, okay? But was Washington too over-aggressive maybe in going to get Carson Wentz? Sure. But ultimately, what they settled on, Louis, was somebody that they could control contractually and in terms of, hey, he didn't have a choice on where to go. It was either here or nowhere, right? So they can control him contractually. He didn't have a choice. He couldn't leave them at the altar. And, oh, by the way, as we know, good Carson Wentz, like you said, has a high-end ceiling. bad Carson Wentz, of course, has a very, very, very slippery
It just feels
floor.
like there's no in between, Chris.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with this game on Sunday, especially with the emotions that go into this for Wentz. Over anybody, I think, is going to look to stick it to Howie Roseman, the Eagles general manager, in this organization overall. Wish the game was in Philly. And because of that, and because of the roller coaster that Wentz already is in games not even with this kind of intensity, I feel like he's either going to throw for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns like he did against Washington that one game, or he's going to throw 5 picks and fumble twice. I don't know if there's going to be an in-between. Yeah. It's going to be a fascinating watch.
I mean, well, first of all, he better not turn the ball over a couple of times because, as you know, the Eagles' defense very opportunistic.
Yes.
And Washington's defense is going to have a hard enough time just on the surface defending Jalen Hurts and all the weapons of the Eagles. We'll get more into that as we go along. But just specifically from Carson, it struck me, the press conferences and the hype that you're talking about. I do a daily 3-hour radio show in D.C., to be honest with you, because the defense was so bad last week, Louis, and because it's been so bad, and everybody's kind of pointing fingers at Jack Del Rio, we haven't talked about Carson going against the Eagles once yet this week.
Wow.
Not once.
That's all Philadelphia is talking about.
Yeah, and part of it is because he played in Indianapolis last year, right? And it almost seems like, oh, wait, this isn't Carson's first time against the Eagles, but it is. And so, like you said, that's all Philadelphia's talking about. We've seen the billboards and the fans are coming down and all that. And I do think it feels a little bit different. And probably the reason why we haven't yet talked about it is because it's not in Philly, like you said. That'll come up on Monday Night Football in a couple of weeks. That will be an incredible atmosphere. But I was part of the Donovan McNabb return game to Lincoln Financial Field in 2010 under Mike Shanahan. Week 4, I'll never forget it. We got eggs thrown at the charter buses coming down the ramps to the link, from the highway. I mean, they were, of course, charged up and whatever. This is a different circumstance because even though there'll be a lot of Eagles fans there, there'll still probably be about, roughly 40 or 40-ish thousand Commanders fans in attendance. So for me, it almost feels like more of a regular game than what it sounds like you guys are making it.
No, I agree. And even you can go back to 2014 when Deshaun Jackson came back with Washington at the link. That was an intense environment too. That's why I kind of wish the NFL would have scheduled that Monday night game at the link first before this matchup because of that intensity. But regardless, I think emotions are going to be running high on both sides of the ball. And it's for Jalen Hurts too, who's trying to prove that he can be the guy Carson was for a little bit with this team. And Chris, he looked like that on Monday night against the Vikings. I thought that was his best performance of his entire career. And it's crazy to see, again, a lot of teams that when they suffer something like the Eagles did with Wentz, it takes them years to bounce back from that. Look at how long it's taken Washington to find their next franchise quarterback. To see where they are 2 years later, kind of unexpectedly so, even this organization, I don't think, knew that Hurts could do that. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I would say it was vintage Jalen Hurts, except it wasn't vintage Jalen Hurts because there was no
him pass the ball like that.
Exactly. But, the thing that you wonder about, right? Clearly they took the gas off the pedal, or the pedal off the gas, I should say, in the second half. Clearly Minnesota made some adjustments and, Philadelphia was just kind of toying with them. So the question will be is how aggressive is Jack Del Rio in this game against Jalen Hurts? Will they just try and gamble and force mistakes and be more man and be more aggressive and blitz more? Or will they play it safe and conservative? That's really what my guess would be. It'll be more safe and conservative than pedal to the metal on the opposite end because they won't want to get burnt by Jalen Hurts. But it'll be really interesting to see how Jalen and that outstanding offensive line and outstanding running game deals with whatever Washington chooses to throw at them. And again, my guess would be it will be more conservative than aggressive, but there will be times where it will be aggressive. And I wonder how he responds to that because I do think almost Monday was almost too easy in a way. And maybe that's a bad thing. So I do want to see this offense of the Birds face some adversity. And I do think Washington's defense will create some of that. Probably not enough, but some of that.
We'll dive deeper into the matchups on both sides of the ball coming up next right here on Crossover Thursday. Locked On Eagles and Locked On Commanders. I'm Louis DiBiase. He's Chris Russell. Today's show is sponsored by Eugenics. Feeling like you just can't get in shape? It's not your fault. As men age, our body naturally loses free testosterone, the man hormone. It happens to every man. It can make it more difficult to stay in shape and be energetic and active. Want more energy to counter that negative physical effects of aging? Nugenix Total T Testosterone Booster with testosterone will help you turn back the clock, re-energize your workouts, get you better results at the gym, and help you look and feel like the man you really want to be. Nugenix Total T contains man-boosting key ingredients like testosterone. It's been validated in 5 clinical studies shown to boost free testosterone levels in men. Because Nugenix Total T boosts free testosterone that the aging process robs, you'll feel stronger, leaner, and you'll have more energy and drive. Nugenix Total T can help re-energize your life and helps you get back to the powerful, confident, good-looking warrior you used to be. Now, to get a complimentary bottle of Nugenix Total T, you can text NFL to 231-231. Text now and get a bottle of Nugenix Thermo, their most powerful fat incinerator ever, with key ingredients to help you get back into shape fast. Absolutely free. Text NFL to 231-231. Again, text NFL to 231-231. Message and data rates may apply. Terms apply. Available at nugenix.com/terms. All right, Eagles and Commanders fans, thanks for joining us on Locked On Crossover Thursday. Locked On Eagles and Locked On Commanders. I'm Louis DiBiase. He's Chris Russell. We got a big game coming up at 1 o'clock in Washington, D.C. on Sunday between the 2-0 Birds and the 1-1 Commanders. And Chris, there's a lot of matchups to look at for this game on both sides of the ball, but I think it might be a shootout. I mean, Jalen Hurts right now is number 1 overall in total offense through 2 weeks. Carson Wentz is 5th. So I don't know. I mean, is this going to be a shootout between these two quarterbacks?
Well, a lot of people around here think it is going to be, 41-38, 38-35, that type of thing. I don't know if it'll be as high as that, Louis, just only because I see Carson Wentz and the Commanders' offensive line struggling against that very talented front of the Philadelphia Eagles, and especially if the defensive coordinator for the Birds, comes after that offensive line like he did Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota offensive line. Now, again, every game plan is different. We all know that every situation is different, but Washington is missing starting center Chase Roulier. He's likely lost again for the year. He went out midway through last year and they really missed him. Now, it looks like as we record this, they'll get Wes Schweitzer back, who is kind of their top reserve guard center. He's played some center, including last year, and he's played it reasonably well. He missed last week's game with a hamstring. He practiced in full on Wednesday, so we'll see about the rest of the week. But barring a setback, it looks like they'll get him back. So that'll help a little bit, but I still expect Philadelphia to be aggressive. I still expect Philadelphia to try and dictate terms of this game, and because of that, I do see Carson Wentz and the Commanders' offense struggling a little bit more to keep up. Maybe the Philadelphia offense doesn't get slowed down. I'm sure we'll get into that. But I do see it taking a while to get into a flow and into a rhythm. Last week, for Eagles fans that didn't see the disastrous first half in Detroit for Carson Wentz and the Commanders' offense, they had 5 3-and-outs and a safety on a 2-play drive, Louis. That was their first half. Now, they woke up in the second half. They did commit a turnover in the second half. Carson was a little bit late and high on a throw across the middle, but otherwise he played really well in that second half. But also that was combined with Aiden Hutchinson, kind of being on one bad wheel, right? So we don't know how much of a factor that was. My point being is I think the Philadelphia defense is probably going to be more up-tempo and more aggressive than Washington can counter with. And I think because of that, I think Washington's going to struggle a little bit on offense.
Yeah, Jonathan Gannon, the Eagles defensive coordinator, normally doesn't blitz a lot. Throughout last year, they were the 3rd lowest blitzing defense in the
remember that,
NFL. But as you mentioned on Monday night against Minnesota, because the 4-man pass rush was not getting home to Jared Goff and the Lions week 1, he brought the pressure a lot. 10 blitzes on Kirk Cousins, who was pressured on 22% of his dropbacks in the game. I think that might be the recipe against Carson Wentz, who likes to force things and hold on to the football maybe longer than he should. But Chris, I do hope that they can win with a 4-man rush and they don't have to do that because, like I said, Wentz is always going to look for the big play. If you can have more guys back in coverage, that can help with turnovers. But I will say, although he is prone to make mistakes, he also is prone to make big plays. And this is, I think, the best trio of weapons he has ever had in his career with Terry McLaurin, Curtis Samuel, and the rookie first-round pick, Jahan Dotson. All 3 look really good these first 2 weeks. The Eagles might have the best trio of corners in the league. Darius Slay, James Bradberry, and Avonte Maddox. That's going to be a big key matchup. I can't wait to watch that one.
Well, and that's part of the reason why I don't think this game will be as crazy of a carnival scoring as you, because I was just about to go there. I mean, watching Slay the other night, I don't know if I saw the right thing, but he was in man, he was in zone. I think he was in zone on that interception in the end zone, if memory serves me correct. It
so,
looked
Chris,
like
Justin
zone.
Jefferson had 1 catch for 7 yards on Darius Slay, and he had 2 interceptions when targeting JJ.
Right. And it looked like at times he was right on his hip, and at times he was kind of, again, playing a little bit off. You know, I don't want to get too Xy and O-y, but the point being is you couldn't play as any probably better as Darius Slay did. Now, does he repeat that on Sunday against, in all likelihood, Terry McLaurin? And you mentioned Curtis Samuel and Jahan Dotson. I think Jahan Dotson, like, one thing that I'm really curious, and you mentioned the matchup of Avonte Maddox in the slot, right?
Yeah.
Both of those players are really, really, really good, even though Jahan Dotson's only going into game 3. He's had incredible get-off moves inside the 5-yard line in both weeks for the Commanders, Jahan Dotson against nickel slot corners. So if he can do that again, that'll be really interesting to see if Carson can find them as they have the last and first 2 weeks of the season. Curtis Samuel was really good to start the year, had a touchdown also on a wheel route out of the backfield last week. So to me, it'll be about the totality of the weapons for the Washington Commanders. And again, if they can get better offensive line play while the Eagles pass rush is fresh, and if they can then again find those guys early in the game, get quick passes, quick hitches, quick slants, quick wide receiver screens, all of that stuff they didn't do, quite honestly, in Detroit.
And then, Chris, when you flip the field and you look at how the Eagles offense will attack this Washington defense, it's going to be interesting. I think the Lions and Vikings had complete opposite approaches. The Lions were blitzing a lot and going after Jalen Hurts, whereas the Vikings were more daring him to throw the football, trying to keep him in the pocket, making the running lanes, cloudier. And that's the thing. Detroit sent the pressure at Hurts, but he managed to escape pretty much every time and made them pay with 90 yards on the ground and a touchdown. He still got his against Minnesota too with 2 rushing touchdowns, but I thought he tore up that soft zone coverage. I feel like with Washington, the key is still against Hurts, I would say, because it was only 1 week, is dare him to throw from inside the numbers with a 4-man pass rush. That'll be key, but I think maybe tighter coverage might be the recipe because Minnesota is playing off. And when you give guys like A.J. Brown, Dallas Goedert, and Devontae Smith free releases, or even Quez Watkins, who had a big touchdown, I don't know, that doesn't seem like the right blueprint. It'll be interesting to see how they attack Hurts compared to what Detroit did and what Minnesota did. I feel like a middle ground there.
I'm totally with you. And that's why I was saying earlier, I don't know how they're going to, do it because they're mostly a zone. Like that. Washington is mostly a zone team, but it's not like they're good in zone. But they're mostly a zone team because Kendall Fuller really can't play man or play it well. Benjamin St-Juste and William Jackson III are more man press corners. And Ben St-Juste is kind of working in his first couple of games here as a nickel corner, right? He's a big kid, 6'1.5", 6'2", but he's still learning the nickel position, and therefore they had miscommunication and whatnot last week. But again, I expect them to play more zone because, Louis, that's what they've played more over the last year and a half, even though I think Jack Del Rio and or Ron Rivera maybe both want to play more man. They realize that by playing man, there's some advantages, but there's also some disadvantages. Now, if you play man against a mobile quarterback, especially with the escapability of Jalen Hurts, as you were mentioning against Detroit, we all saw it. Detroit would play man, they would blitz, they would pressure, and boom, Jalen Hurts would run right out of it. Well, again, Carson Wentz couldn't do that against that Detroit pass rush, so that's why that turned into a disaster. If Washington tries to do that against Jalen Hurts, I think they'll have probably better success than maybe Detroit did early on, but I don't think that's sustainable, and I don't know if you can do that all game. I wonder, this is me, I've talked to no coaches, I wonder if a guy like Jamin Davis, who is the oft-criticized rookie out of Kentucky, a second-year player out of Kentucky, I wonder if he's more like their spy type player because he's an athlete that somewhat can keep up with Jalen Hurts. Not that he can. Really, nobody can. But if there is one guy on that defense, he can. And he's better, I think, attacking and being aggressive as opposed to sitting back, again, playing zones and playing large areas of the field. to me, I would expect Washington to be more aggressive, to play more man than they normally do, which again is about 70-ish% zone.
Yeah.
And try and attack that way, and then maybe play a little bit more conservatively, cloud coverages and that type of thing on 3rd and 10, 3rd and 12, 3rd and whatever. At least that's the way I see it. And I don't know. I think Philadelphia, I could be wrong. I think Philadelphia will probably play somewhat similar, right? Because you don't want to get the top taken off of the lid by those three receivers.
It's a super tough, chess game that you're going to be playing between these two offenses that have a lot of talent. And as I mentioned earlier, Wentz and Hurts are producing at top 5 levels when it comes to yardage production. It's going to be very interesting to see how these defenses attack these two teams on Sunday. Chris, we'll get into our final predictions coming up next right here on Crossover Thursday.
Absolutely. But first, we tell you about our friends at Bet Online. That's right, betonline.net. They are awesome. Of course, you can get in on all the action as you can each and every day with our friends at Bet Online. Why? Because they have all of the action that you want, right? Bet Online is your place to go for NFL, college football, Major League Baseball heading down the stretch. They have up-to-date line spreads. You have live in-game betting. You have all the prop bets. You have everything that you want. Are you a Birds fan feeling pretty confident coming down I-95 and heading to, let's call it Philly 2.0, let's call whatever you want, the Link 2.0, whatever. And maybe you want to take the Eagles minus the 6.5, kind of depending on where it ends. Or are you a Commanders fan or feeling the love for the Commanders and Commander Carson Wentz in the revenge game and take them a little bit? Or you can do individual props. You know the deal. Bet Online has it all for you. Again, whatever sport you're talking about, there's some huge college football games coming up, of course, this weekend, as there are, including on Thursday night. There's Thursday night NFL. There's Monday night NFL. No 2 games this week, just a traditional one, but the slate is stacked. Go to Bet Online right now or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action at Bet Online, where the game starts.
All right, we are wrapping up Crossover Thursday right here on Locked On Eagles and Locked On Commanders. I'm Louis DiBiase, and he's Chris Russell. Eagles Commanders Sunday at 1 o'clock in D.C. Chris, you mentioned it there, talking about Bet Online. I think the atmosphere is going to be split. Eagles fans always travel well. They like to take over this stadium, and especially against Carson Wentz, Week 3, feeling the 2-0 juices right now. I think they're going to be getting down there. The Eagles are 6.5-point favorites right now, according to Bet Online. Do you like Washington to cover there? What are your overall feelings on this game and how it's going to go for Washington?
If I had to guess, Louis, I think it's going to be a closer game than most people think it is going to be. The spread initially was 4 before Philadelphia dismantled Kirk Cousins and Minnesota, and then it bumped up, like you said, currently standing at 6.5. Again, it could be 6, it could be 7, depending on how the public money goes by the time we get to kickoff Sunday at 1 o'clock. If I had to guess, the Commanders are going to keep this game close enough and within striking distance, and I could see them covering. I don't know if they win. They're going to have to play, I don't want to say a perfect game. There's no such thing as a perfect game, but they're going to have to generate 3+ turnovers, in my opinion, or 3+ takeaways, I should say, and limit the turnovers on their own to 1. Carson's got 3 interceptions through 2 games. They have 4 turnovers through 2 games, meaning the Commanders' offense. There's been large stretches of gaps of really bad offensive play, despite all the good numbers for Wentz and the Commanders. That being said, again, I think they're good enough to stay within hunting distance, and I'll take the Commanders plus, let's call it the 6.5 right now.
Yeah.
But if I had to do a straight up bet, I would take the Eagles.
I completely agree. I would take the Eagles money line. If you're going to go between the two, I would probably take Washington to cover. It's very tough to bet on these games where there's emotions like this, and it's almost like a revenge game, if you will. They always could go one or two ways. As I said earlier in the show, it's like Wentz could throw for 6 touchdowns on this team, or he could throw for 4 interceptions. I'm not sure if there's really going to be a middle ground here. I think it's going to be a close game, though. I would say, if I gave a score prediction, 28-24, maybe Eagles, I say Washington does cover at home. They're a more talented team than I think they're given credit for because of, the memes Wentz gets on Twitter and this organization overall does. But I think they're a competitive team that's going to be in this NFC East race. the other bet I want to ask you about, Chris, the over-under right now is at 47 total points. We talked about the offense for both sides. I think I'm going to hammer the over there.
I mean, normally I would say that's a pretty safe bet, but for whatever reason, I have a feeling, it's going to be like 83, 84 degrees and sunny. So weather is not going to be a major factor, but it's going to be warm on Sunday at FedEx Field. I have a feeling that, Philadelphia likes to run the football. Granted, they're not a 3 yards in a cloud of dust run offense, as you know, and as Eagle fans know. And Washington, even though they give up a lot of points, and they have given up a lot of points, I do feel they will be better defensively in this game than they've been. So I'm actually going to take the slight under, okay. I think, and go slightly under. I was thinking kind of 24, 21-ish, somewhere in that range. So that would get me the under if that's officially where I hang out in that neighborhood. Again, I do think the Commanders will put in a better performance. I just think, Louis, they are a team. First of all, they're wretched on special teams. Okay, so that always.
So are the Eagles.
Yeah. Well, all right. So too bad. I mean. But the Commanders are really bad on special teams. No matter what Ron Rivera says, they're awful on special teams. Now, sometimes they play okay. Sometimes, like last week in Detroit, they're absolutely brutal. So I can see them costing themselves points and maybe even the game in that respect. We'll have to see, of course. But the Commanders, I sense that after getting their teeth knocked in over the last 7 days, and after arriving in Detroit fat, drunk, and happy, that they will be much more squared on straight this week. And I think, again, this will be a closer game and a more competitive, lower scoring game than, again, the carnival that many are expecting.
Can't wait to find out what happens in this matchup Sunday at 1 o'clock. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Today's edition of Crossover Thursday with Locked On Eagles and Locked On Commanders. You can find both podcasts free and available Monday through Friday on all podcast platforms and on YouTube as well. Thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles and Locked On Commanders your first listens each and every day. Make sure your second listen is the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson give you the expert NFL analysis in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. Chris, always great to talk to you, my friend. I'm sure we'll do it again soon, a little later on in the season, and enjoy the game on Sunday.
Absolutely. Sounds great, Lou. Always good to be with you.